keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Break. I think it's tough to say that there's a such thing as a bad Friday, but it's certainly not the best Friday we could be having here in Broncos country after a disappointing blown lead loss to the Chargers with a playoff clinching berth on the line. Will Petersen, would you agree with that? There's no such thing as a bad Friday, but we could be doing better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of grumpy today, Richie. I'm not going to lie, man. Like, when they're up 24-13, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. They're going to the postseason. We're going to Pittsburgh. We're going to Houston. And they fall apart. A meltdown in Los Angeles is how I would put it.
Yeah, I think that this is something that we've grown accustomed to a lot in the last 8 years, basically, since Super Bowl 50. But not something we've experienced as much with Sean Payton. And that is just, I think the Broncos got outcoached last night. And when I say that, I don't mean because Jim Harbaugh was able to execute the first successful fair catch free kick since the mid 70s. And, Justin Herbert made some plays and things like that. It was halftime adjustments. I think the Broncos were clicking, especially in the run game, which is something we're not used to seeing this season. Things really seemed to be clicking in the run game. The offense was moving down the field. Those who maybe had an investment in the under, like myself, were a little disappointed on that, but excited about the way things were looking. And after halftime, it just totally changed. And I think that goes on Sean Payton. I think it goes on Vance Joseph. I just think Jim Harbaugh and his crew outcoached him.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because when you score 3 touchdowns on your first 3 drives, and it's the first time that's ever happened against Jim Harbaugh. That stat was floating around on the internet last night. You scored 21 points on your first 3 drives, and for all intents and purposes, you scored 3 points the rest of the game, Richie. I know Will Lutz kicked the 55-yarder with 57 seconds left, but that was a desperation thing. I mean, you really scored 3 points. And it was a lot of focus on Sean Payton's play sheet saying, run it, right? Mm-hmm. And he did. I mean, that first drive, I was sitting on my couch going, oh my gosh, where has this been all year? And he used 4 different guys in the backfield. He used Bo Nix. Like, they were going up and down the field at will. And then it just felt like Sean was, Bo's on national TV. I got to get Bo more involved. And he abandoned the run game. He got out coached. He didn't go for it on 4th and 5 at midfield down 3. I mean, you talk about a coward decision. And then the Chargers go 90 yards the other way. Like, there was just so much to not like about those final 25 minutes, which is disappointing because the first 35 minutes, Richie, other than the fair catch kick, which we'll get into, and I have thoughts on the Traymon Smith penalty, but the first 35 minutes were brilliant. Like, everyone's praising Sean. Sean's a wizard. This is immaculate. Sean's unbelievable. It's just, you've never seen one coaching job for 35 minutes be so good and a second coaching job for the last 25 minutes be so pitiful.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that I did not expect the offense. And I was calling, especially in the run game. I had said yesterday, I told James, they're out of rabbits to pull out of the hat when it comes to the run game. So they've tried a lot, and we hear things like get more creative, right? Well, at some point, you just got to turn the ball and hand it off,
right?
And somebody's got to make a play. They've mixed in Marvin Mims in a way that I think, although it hasn't been perfect, has provided some juice and some spark, and it's allowing Marvin Mims to exercise his athleticism and his skill set in a different way beyond just returning punts, which he's also doing better than he has in previous years. I thought Audric Estime kind of came out of the gates hot, and Blake Watson came out of the gate a little bit hot, and it was nice to see a little bit of juice there. And the thing that I told James that I wanted more of yesterday that I think I got, and I think it was a good thing, was more Bo Nix runs.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the most athletic guys, given what we've seen from the backfield, he's one of the most athletic guys you got with his legs. And although you're already shouldering the entire passing offense on him, essentially, because you have a little bit of a dearth of playmakers, catching the ball, I think at some point you might just have to put a little more on his plate. They did, and it worked. And to your point, in the second half, it just felt like we went away from that. And I don't know if it's Sean Payton intending to go away from it, or if it's Jim Harbaugh and his staff made adjustments and they realized that Bo Nix wasn't really pushing the ball down the field very much like we've seen him be aggressive at trying to do in the past. And so they were able to take that shell coverage, push the pressure forward, and not worry about getting beat deep. And that limited the effectiveness, which then caused Sean to what we've seen, to do what we've seen in the past, which is just go away from it.
Yeah.
So I don't know where's the chicken, where's the egg, if Sean made a conscious decision to do it, or if it was reactionary because Harbaugh's staff had kind of clamped down on it.
I don't know if it's so much conscious. I think it's more he can't help himself, right? Like he just can't help himself. Richie, you're not writing that on your play sheet unless you know deep down you have a problem committing to the run, right? Like
it's like a sticky note reminder.
Yeah, it'd be you start
take out the trash.
You start this show at noon every day, and I respect it. But if you had to write on your notepad every morning, be in studio by 11:57, it would mean you were habitually late. Like I know, like the internet
means I'm Zach Bye.
Yeah. Oh, shots fired. I know the internet was having fun with that last night, but I honestly do think there was more to it. Like this is a guy who sort of has a problem not being able to run the football enough. And he's writing reminders to himself. And I wanted to scream at him, flip the play sheet back over. Look at your note. Look at your note. Look at your note, as that game sort of got away from them. And I mean, okay, here's the thing. The Chiefs lost, agony because of one play, right? Like your heart's broken in a half a second. That loss, they ripped my heart out over an hour last night, you know? And we've had that debate in sports before, like what's worse, like Raheem Moore, the instant, like, oh my gosh, I'm screwed, or the you're on the Titanic. Like the Broncos were on the Titanic last night. We all knew where it was going to end, at the bottom of the ocean. But Richie, that hour as a Broncos fan, that was not fun.
It was not. And I want to get your thoughts on some of the key moments from that game, starting with the fair catch free kick conversion. Like I said, the first successful conversion since the mid-70s, which was ironically also by the Chargers.
Yeah.
What did you think? Did you know what was going on when it was going on? Because I was watching it at a watering hole.
Okay.
And I was very confused for a minute. I thought, because there's no sound, so I'm looking at the ref, I'm trying to read his lips, and he's making motions. Yeah. And I'm thinking the Broncos, at first, I'm thinking the Broncos just recovered the ball. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to get a shot to get something here right beforehand. And then all of a sudden the Chargers have the ball, and I'm like, okay. And they're lining up for what looks like a kickoff, essentially. But the score hasn't changed. I'm like, what am I missing?
Yeah. It was confusing. I will say that Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit did do a good job on the broadcast of walking it through it. And you and I are in this business professionally. Like, I love listening to the broadcasters, but 99.9% of the time, I don't need them to tell me what's going on. Well, last night was sort of the 0.1 instance where I was glad that Al and Kirk were walking me through exactly what's happening. They brought in Terry McCauley, the rules analyst. It's fluky. It's a weird rule. It's a stupid rule. Like, ultimately, it's a stupid rule. But let's get into what happened, because there is so much to unpack. Okay. So, first of all, Javonte Williams falls on second down, and that just kills the Broncos, because you were going to be able to run the clock out. Instead, you have to run it on third. Jim Harbaugh calls a timeout with 8 seconds left. Smart timeout by Harbaugh. At that point, you're trying to block a punt, get a kick return, see something fluky happen. Where I had a major problem was Traymon Smith got pushed. Traymon Smith got pushed into the punt returner, and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because no one on the broadcast mentioned it. After I just gave him praise, I'll rip him a little bit. Not that many people on social media are mentioning it, although I tweeted about it, and my mentions are blowing up with people agreeing. I don't understand how Traymon Smith getting pushed isn't a bigger story, because if he gets pushed, that is a live ball, that is a fumble, that is the Broncos ball at like the 37-yard line, and you're either trying a Will Lutz 54-yarder or you're throwing a Hail Mary. Instead, 15 yards the other way, one untimed down, and then this fluky fair catch kick things happens. I mean, Richie, people are saying that's a 3-point swing. I'd argue it's a 6-point swing because Will Lutz could have made the field goal.
You got to count the negative points on the other end.
Because the Broncos should have been awarded the football. It's the play of the night. There's other ones we'll get into too, but there's just so much to unpack on that play.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we see situations where a player either going out of bounds or making forcible contact by being pushed or by being influenced by the flow of the play. Like a player that gets pushed out of bounds can come back in bounds and be the first to touch the ball because he didn't take himself out of bounds. And so you would think that something would apply there. And then you get into the whole human error element of things, and he didn't see it and it's not reviewable and yada, yada, yada. It just feels like it feels like there's on paper not a lot of instances where things like this can slip through the cracks, but it does seem like it happens more and more frequently, and it just gets magnified because it's when it's your team that's on the receiving end of it. Because I agree with you. The Broncos at that point in the game, you're looking at going up, what was it, 21-10?
21-10 into the locker room.
Into the locker room. And
you get the football.
Yes. So 21-10 with the ball coming back to you, a 2-possession lead with a 2-point conversion just to tie it. And I was stunned, frankly, because I had picked part of the game. I'm thinking this is going to be, I said 19-16 Broncos win. I thought it was going to be an ugly, because, Jim Harbaugh, who has a propensity, even though they haven't been able to do it well since J.K. Dobbins got hurt, a propensity to kind of win games in the trenches and grind it out and gut it out.
Muck it up.
Yeah. And I thought that's how it was going to be. And then the Broncos come out and score touchdowns on their first 3 possessions. I'm thinking they're rolling. And this is going to be a coming out party for the James Marilats and the others who say they've and justifiably so, that they haven't beaten a team with a winning record and they're the best JV team in the league. And I'm thinking this was always the game that was going to be earmarked. And it just, that play signified to me, that was that play, the fair catch interference and the field goal that subsequently came from it. That to me was like the reverse of Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball before the end zone. That was the moment where things started to snowball in the wrong direction for the Broncos, like it started to snowball in the right direction in the Colts game.
Yeah, and it's funny because one week you can be so high based on your team got the break.
Yep.
And then the next week you can get kicked in the stomach because our team didn't get the break last night. And you're right, that was the momentum turning point. Although I will say this, the Broncos got the ball, chewed up 6 minutes of clock, and kicked a field goal midway through the third quarter to make it 24-13. I do think that sort of stopped the bleeding, if you will. And then what happened on the Chargers' next drive? I hate to make it the ref show, Richie, but Justin Strnad goes late on Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert flops like a fish out of water.
It was egregious.
So that's 2 bad calls now, and I'm sure we'll get to more as the show goes on. But that's 2 bad calls that cost the Broncos points. You can assume the Chargers kick a field goal there, make it 24-16. Instead, they get the touchdown, make it 24-19, and then it feels like the wheels are really coming off. I mean, I'll just throw it back on you. Your thoughts on the Strnad thing, because I'm like, again, am I taking crazy pills? That was an all-time flop from Justin Herbert. That should not have been a personal foul.
No, I agree with you. And it's one of those things where, again, in the NFL, I think it's fair to say that the league and indirectly us as viewers, because the league is crafting things and catering things toward what we, the viewers, seem to want. And that is more offense, more possessions, points, scoring, things of that nature. We've already made it, between us and the league, hard to be a defender in the National Football League. Playing defense with all of the rules that they have to keep in mind is difficult. And it just, at some point, we've got to scale some of this back, because we praise the physicality and the violent nature of these collisions and these things, but then we just expect that a player who's in mid-pursuit to do the things that we want to see can just subsequently change direction, stop all momentum, potentially put themselves at an injury risk to avoid something that is actually out of their control, because it's all predicated by the quarterback's movement. I thought it was a stupid penalty. I think we see a lot of these. That was not like a, you can tell sometimes.
It wasn't like the one in Houston.
The Trevor Lawrence.
Or in Jacksonville.
Yes, in Jacksonville. It wasn't like it was Al-Shair.
Yep. Who got suspended 3 games.
Correct. That, he looked like he was headhunting there. This was not the case with Strnad. He barely even grazed. I actually was impressed with his ability to move it. Now, did he make contact? Yes. But I think that might have been the softest hit that Justin Herbert took all night.
Yeah, he might have a future in European soccer with that kind of flop, man. I mean, seriously, like, it was ridiculous. And I guess credit to Herbert for selling it, if that's the player he wants to be and he gets his team a first down. But just from like really? That you want to win football games by flopping? Okay, congrats. The refs awarded your egregious action. And I couldn't believe the amount of people on social media that were killing Strnad. I'm glad you and I are on the same page on it. It was not Justin Strnad's fault at all. It was a bad call by the refs, and it was complicated by the fact that Herbert did something that, I get it, it's gamesmanship, but I also don't love my quarterback flopping around like a dead fish.
No, and I am all for player safety, and I think like what happened to Trevor Lawrence was brutal.
It was scary.
And it was scary. And you don't want to see that. But there is another side of the coin, and this is almost like the small percentage that ruin it for the majority kind of thing. But like when Kenny Pickett ran the fake slide, remember that? And then you had defenders being like, are you kidding me? Or Patrick Mahomes kind of like making it look like he was going to go out of bounds. And so defenders start to pull up as they've been instructed by the league to do. And then he sneaks forward for another 4 or 5 yards and a first down. There's a part of me when I see those instances where I'm like, you know what? Level them. Take the penalty and just level them. Because at some point, you've got to be able to get back on the other end. And again, I don't think any one of these individual moments, the fair catch interference, the Sternad penalty, Bo Nix taking that sack with just a couple of minutes left in the game on first down to put you behind the chains another 12 yards on a gotta-have-it drive. There's none of these individual moments. Garrett Bowles' holding penalty, or he had a couple of them in succession.
Zach Allen's offsides. Was Zach Allen off? I've seen 3 different angles. I'm not so sure he was offsides, but that was the game-winning drive that Sean in his post-game presser said we had 3 penalties on that drive. I didn't know if Sean was going to take the bait and blame the refs. I wrote about this at denversports.com. He didn't. He blamed his own players, which I respect and appreciate. He also would have gotten fined pretty heavily, but I do think there was a notion last night the penalties were pretty lopsided. Sorry, I cut you off, but I know what you're going to say here. So
not each one of those individual moments is what costs them the game. But when you start adding everything up, and this goes to good teams put themselves in a position to not let things come down to a whistle, to not have a zebra sighting be what chooses win or chooses loss. And the Broncos didn't do the best job of putting themselves in those positions. Doesn't take away the fact that they were wrong, right, and different. It's just the Broncos as a whole did not prepare themselves. They let the game be dictated by a lot of other things.
Well, yeah, and there's one more that's a huge one that we have to address. The Marvin Mims non-DPI call. I mean, I get two things can be true, guys. Bo Nix can underthrow the ball. Bo Nix underthrew the football. But also the defender never turned his head. He was all over Marvin Mims. It is clear as day DPI, and the officials keep the flags in their pockets. Another massive moment in that football game.
Yeah, and I'll even say that some could argue that it deserves credit. Some could argue that, especially given the circumstance, that it was a negative thing. We see a lot of quarterbacks all the time throw those balls up purely to draw a penalty.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Bo Nix wasn't trying to do that. And Marvin Mims, in my opinion, to his credit, wasn't going out of his way to try to jockey it and sell it. He was actually trying to make the play on the ball, even though because of the underthrow, it wasn't as catchable as it should have been. But you're right. You don't even need to freeze frame it. Whether you watch it in real time, whether it's slowed down, you have an official on that side of the field. He never turns his head. He's got his arms all the way up in Marvin Mims, tangled up, and Marvin Mims literally can't do anything else.
It's DPI.
It's
classic DPI.
It's if you like when you say textbook, it's literally textbook. If there was a dictionary definition or the rule book that the NFL gives out, if you were to put up a freeze frame, it's that one of Marvin Mims, just like this, with nothing he can do.
Yep. No, it was frustrating. It was a collection of moments that led to a collapse in Los Angeles. And again, I don't want to make it the ref show, but I didn't like the refereeing last night. I thought it was pretty anti-Bronco.
Can I give you a element of the game that Sean Payton referenced a little bit last night that I don't think he should be allowed to do, that could have potentially impacted things? And that is, we talked about it plenty of times since it happened, the decision to flex yourself for a second time on a road Thursday night game on a short week. Sean Payton mentioned it. Bo Nix referenced it. Sean Payton said, it's tough to prepare in a short week. It's like, hey, Sean, you don't get to say that because you chose to do this. You did this to yourself. You found, I've been joking about it for weeks. You found the one thing that the evil empire, the NFL, who has all the power in the world, can't force you to do, and you gave it to him anyways. Yeah. So this is in no way, shape, or form can you turn around and be like, well, you know how it is with short weeks. It's tough to do. It's like, you didn't have to do it. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So you chose because of, I think, and I gave Sean Payton credit for this yesterday, and I stand by that, because I said ultimately, because of how he referenced it in his press conference earlier this week, when he made the comment about, well, hey, listen, you can either play in the 1 p.m. window all your life, or you can play in prime time. I choose to play in prime time, so we're just going to tell us when and where to play, and we'll be there. That is Sean Payton being true to himself. That's who he is. That's how he's operated for basically 2 decades at the head coaching level in the NFL. And I think that when you are tasked with rebuilding or reconstructing a culture, for a locker room and an organization from top to bottom that has been void of it for nearly a decade, that authenticity in terms of your ethos is important. It's the same reason why I don't beat up Dan Campbell as much as other people do for some of the things he does going forward on fourth down, on your own 15-yard line.
Yeah, he's true to himself.
He's true to himself.
Yep.
And so Sean Payton doing this was true to yourself, because strategically, there's no real advantage there. I know the people were trying to, I think, grasp at straws and say, oh, well, you can use the bye week for this and you flex them out of this. No, this was a guy who the NFL said, hey, you want to play under the lights or you want to get buried in that CBS middle window?
Yeah.
And he chose to do it. But you don't get to then retroactively come back and say, it's tough. So I don't think the result of this game would have been any different if they played on Sunday.
Well, a move of an egomaniac, first of all. So that's what Sean is. He's an egomaniac.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. Sean's ego got in the way a little bit there, but he did stay true to himself. The pushback I'll give you on that, though, that the result would have been the same. Why do teams collapse? They're tired. Broncos look tired.
You didn't think they didn't have the legs?
Last 25 minutes of that football game, the defense didn't have the legs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Herbert moved the ball up and down the freaking field. He's scrambling for 16 yards on 3rd and 10 when you could get off the field and get the ball back to Bo Nix. And then Gus Edwards is going for 43. And then Hassan Haskins is scoring. Like, they ran out of gas, Richie. So the pushback I would give you with another 96 hours, maybe the tank's a little more full.
It's possible. Listen, that's why I threw it out there to you, because I think that more so than just being tired, I think the Broncos kind of crumbled internally with those other factors. I think they were undisciplined with some of the penalties. I think they got a bad draw with some other ones. And I think schematically, they did not make the proper adjustments that the Chargers did, and they did not use the effectiveness of the running game as well in the second half. So maybe it would have made a difference. Maybe it wouldn't, but it's not a hair on fire kind of loss. The Broncos still have a very high probability of making the playoffs. I think it's like in the 70s now, mid 70s.
I think it's even higher, but
mid 80s. But
real quick, just pushback.
Okay.
You were going to Pittsburgh or Houston if you won that game last night.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even if you get in, you're going to Buffalo. So that's where I'll give you the pushback of I am a little hair on fire. I thought they had a chance to win in round one, and now I think they might lose by 40 to the Bills.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I was meaning in terms of the prospect of making the postseason. But if you expand it beyond that, in terms of the seeding and the matchup, yeah, you probably did just make it a lot harder.
You blew a golden opportunity. You blew, because we all think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like a lot of Broncos country feels this way. They could have gone to Houston and beaten the Texans. They could have gone to Pittsburgh and beaten the Steelers. They ain't going to Orchard Park and beating the Bills. So, yeah, it'd be fun to get in. But what last night did is it assured you're one and done in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that they've been a little bit uncharacteristic the last 3 games. But I do think that by and large, for the majority of this season, the Broncos have had a playoff caliber defense that is capable of beating any of the playoff teams in the AFC. Buffalo is definitely the least likely for that to happen.
I was going to say anyone with an asterisk. The Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen.
Josh Allen is on another world.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, it'll be like we had like the dream scenario matchup of like Russell Wilson, who didn't play when the Broncos and Steelers met at the beginning of the year. You know, Russell Wilson versus Sean Payton in the postseason, opening round kind of thing. And you can make that path. This is like being confronted with the ex-girlfriend, and she's a supermodel now, and she's gonna walk all over you if they have to face Josh Allen in the postseason,
or when they face Josh Allen because of the collapse in Los Angeles.
Correct. And then do you think that tonight's loss, in retrospect, will look a lot like when the Nuggets lost to a horrible San Antonio team, which forced them into a tiebreaker for the number 1 seed, which they lost and then had to go into the other side of the bracket? They wouldn't have had to face Minnesota or LA. They could have gone through New Orleans and had the same path that OKC did until they ran out.
It's a great analogy, one I hadn't considered. But yes, it may be the loss that we look back on, especially if Houston and Pittsburgh lose in the first round, kind of ripe for the taking. That definitely may be the loss we go, they still got in. And I'm sure you'll talk coffee break all next week about whether or not they're still going to get in. But if they get the 7 seed and they go to Buffalo, that's a perfect analogy, my friend. It'll be a lot like the Nuggets blowing that game to the Spurs last year.
So in closing here, because I think we've talked out a lot of different things that went wrong for the Broncos, from the situational awareness and the adjustments, from a coaching perspective, the abandoning of the run game, or a supposed or alleged abandoning of the run game, whether it was chicken or egg, that forced it.
The officiating,
the defense, having some lapses. I mean, they were picking on Sternad, and it was almost like it wasn't quite a Levi Wallace level performance, the Jerry Jeudy. But when you got one specific player in your defense who's giving up 7 receptions for over 100 yards,
and you miss Alex Singleton,
and he's not a corner, they were definitely keen in on that. So we've gone through, we've laid a lot of that out. Who is most at fault, or what is most at fault for this loss?
Putting me on the spot.
Acknowledging that it's usually a multitude of factors.
but if you're gonna make me pick one, I'm gonna say the refs. I'm gonna say the Zebras. Like, I just thought the Zebras had an awful game last night. We've identified 4 different massive plays, okay, between Traymon Smith, Justin Strenad, the non-call on Marvin Mims, Zach Allen. Like, it just, Richie, if any one of those 4 goes the Broncos' way, we may be sitting here talking about a win. Like, I know that seems sour grapes, guys, but we're not just harping on one call. We've provided evidence over the last 25 minutes of many calls. I'll be that guy. I'm blaming it on the refs. How about you?
Boy, you are tempting me in a way, because I make it very clear my general disdain for officials in general. I loathe them in virtually every sport. If you could find a way, I've often said, if you could find a way to AI automate officiating that wouldn't totally disrupt or ruin the flow of games, which we're not there yet, but I'll sign up for it if and when in a heartbeat, because I would, if I never had to watch another Angel Hernandez of the world kind of situation. But I'm not going to be the guy that blames the refs, because I do think that unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, by and large, cosmically, things seem to balance out in the long view. What I'm going to blame it on, and this is probably the least scathed unit all season long, I'm going to put it a little bit on the defense. I think VJ did not do enough to curtail the second half adjustments that Jim Harbaugh made offensively. I think the floodgates got let open, because if I told you 3 weeks ago that the Broncos are going to go on the road to LA on a short week and put up 27 points, given with how the defense played, that's a W.
Did they win 27-10 or 27-13?
Exactly.
That would have been my question.
Exactly. So we've said it all that we said it all the time in criticism of the offense before, by saying, hey, your defense only gives up 17 points a game. You got to find a way to be better than 5 and 8 at this point in the season. Well, now it's kind of that time of the, hey, the offense put up 27 points. And they didn't get defensive scores that have inflated some of the scoring, in previous games. They didn't get any of that. You can't put up 3 straight touchdowns, have almost a double-digit lead, and then blow it at the second half, getting outscored 24-6 or whatever it was. You can't do that. I am going to put it on what's been, by and large, the best part of the Broncos team. That was their fault last night.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I think that the officials are in the conversation. I think the defense is in the conversation. I think Sean Payton's in the conversation.
Ultimately, everybody's got some dirt on their hands.
Exactly. I think Bo Nix is in the conversation for underthrowing Marvin Mims, because the refs messed up, but it's a touchdown with a better throw in football. So I mean, it's just like, it's honestly how you started the show. It's kind of just a depressing Friday, guys, because the Broncos blew a really great chance last night.
They did. And, there's still going to be, regardless of how this season pans out, there's still going to be things that we can look back and hang our hat on. I think very few of us, I should say, expected this level of success, these kind of conversations to be had in mid to late December for the Broncos in the first year of a supposed rebuild with a rookie quarterback who was the 6th taken off the board. They've secured their first winning season since 2016.
I get all that. All have perspective.
Yes.
In March,
it's not the time for that.
I can't have perspective the day after.
That's what I was going to say. It's not the time for that now, but it will be. And I think that while we're looking at it that way, it'll feel good. But for now, it just doesn't. And it puts a lot more impetus on the Bengals game. And who knows? Now, there could be some interesting things to watch for down the line with Buffalo and KC. I don't know that the number 1 seed is totally locked up yet. So maybe you end up playing Kansas City in the first round if Buffalo continues on a tear. I don't love that necessarily either. You kind of wanted to be in the middle there, but not the best Friday. Could be worse, but not not by much.
Not by much.
So one thing is for sure, we no, I'm not even going to say that. One thing is for sure, we will have more Broncos football to react to. This loss will fade. It just might be a little bit of a, this is a little coal in our stocking before we get to the real thing next week. So appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Give us a follow on social media at Denver Sportscom. Like and subscribe on YouTube. So much great content from guys like Will, Jake Shapiro, Cecil Lammy, all of our Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan talent. Every day, 24/7, 365, right at your fingertips. And we will be back on Monday for more.